Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. President Trump signed the Board of Peace Charter in Davos today, launching a new international effort to oversee Gaza's reconstruction. Also, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine will hold their first trilateral talks this week. President Trump says the U.S. is negotiating an arrangement to secure full access to Greenland. The details of the planned deal and what Trump says about the costs for the U.S. The FBI arrests an anti-ICE activist who allegedly organized an attack on a church in St. Paul. The Vice President, Vance, visiting Minneapolis. We have the latest there. Former Special Counsel Jack Smith testifying before Congress. What he has to say about the 2 criminal prosecutions he brought against President Trump. A major winter storm is taking hold of much of the country. Forecasters warning temperatures could plummet drastically over the weekend.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Thursday, January 22nd. I'm Stephanie Cox. President Trump today signed the Board of Peace Charter on the last day of his visit to Davos, Switzerland. The ceremony officially launches the new international organization tasked with overseeing the peace process between Israel and Hamas to end the war in Gaza. NTD's Daniel Monahan has key takeaways from the event.
President Trump today discussed the future of Gaza at Davos.
We're committed to ensuring Gaza is demilitarized, properly governed, and beautifully rebuilt.
Trump projected optimism on the eventual outcome.
We're going to be very successful in Gaza. It's going to be a great thing to watch.
Other top officials shared Trump's bright outlook.
This vision for the future of the region is not just possible and promising. It is our destiny if we put the time and the effort that it requires, as I know this board will do.
We have created a sense of hope for what the future can bring in Gaza and all other places where the Board of Peace will operate.
This is not just a board of peace, this is a board of action. Just like President Trump is a president of action.
Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, says Hamas demilitarizing increases stability for investment.
We need investments in order to start giving jobs. We want to take these people. 85% of the aid of Gaza, 85% of the GDP of Gaza has been aid for a long time. That's not sustainable.
Kushner sees a future for Gaza with 100% full employment and opportunity for everybody there.
New Gaza. It could be a hope, it could be a destination, have a lot of industry, and really be a place that the people there can thrive, have great employment.
More than 20 countries have accepted invitations to join the Board of Peace so far. President Trump says Russian President Putin has accepted the invitation, while Putin says he's still studying the proposal. The Russian leader is already discussing where he would get the funds for the board. He told Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas today that Russia is ready to send $1 billion of Russian assets frozen in the U.S. to the Board of Peace initiative to support the Palestinian people.
I think this is quite possible. We used to discuss such options earlier with members of the American administration. And today we plan to discuss this issue at a meeting with the U.S. envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in Moscow.
The Board of Peace will include a national committee for the administration of Gaza, led by Palestinian Authority official Ali Abdel Hamed Sha'ath. The Palestinian leader said today that the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza will be open next week on both sides. He said reopening the crossing marks a lifeline for Gaza and signals that the territory is no longer closed to the future or defined solely by war. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
President Trump met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Davos today. Trump said his message to Russian leader Vladimir Putin was that the war in Ukraine has to end.
The meeting was good. Look, we have a ways to go. They're meeting with President Putin today, as you know. The meeting was good with President Zelenskyy. We'll see how it turns out. A lot of people being killed.
What's going to be the message to President Putin? What do you want President Putin to do?
The war has to end. We hope it's going to end. A lot of people being killed. Last month they had 30,000 people killed. 30,000, mostly soldiers. And it's really a war that has to end.
President, what do you expect?
about joining your board of peace?
We didn't discuss that. We're meeting with Russia. That'll take place tomorrow. They're going to be meeting with President Putin. I had a very good meeting with President Zelenskyy. Everybody wants to have the war end.
Trump said a deal was reasonably close. The Kremlin said President Putin will meet later today with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Witkoff said earlier there's just one issue left to resolve in the talks to negotiate an end to the conflict in Ukraine. The Kremlin refused to comment on that. A spokesman today reaffirmed that Putin highly values peacemaking efforts by President Trump and his team. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy announced that representatives from Ukraine, Russia, and the U.S. will hold talks in the United Arab Emirates this week. This will mark the first such meeting since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Zelenskyy said he hoped Russia would be prepared to compromise, which he believed would bring an end to the war. Here's the Ukrainian president speaking in Davos.
American team will go to Moscow today. Yes, they waited for our meeting with President Trump, and now they will go, and my team will meet American team, and I think that it will be the first trilateral meeting in Emirates. It will be tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Yes, it will be 2 days meetings in Emirates. I hope that Emirates know about it. Yes, sometimes we have such surprises from American side. Yeah, I think great ideas with drones. God bless. The war will stop. I hope so.
Former special counsel Jack Smith is appearing before the House Judiciary Committee today. He's testifying publicly for the first time about the 2 failed criminal prosecutions against President Trump. At the hearing today, committee chair Jim Jordan accused Democrats of going after President Trump for 10 years. He also accused Smith of being motivated by politics.
It was always about politics. The good news is the American people saw through it. They saw through it. For so long, the left has controlled so much in this country. The left controlled big media, the left controlled big tech, the left controlled academia, Hollywood, certainly the Democrat Party, and I think all too much the federal bureaucracy. But the left doesn't control we the people. And in spite of the left and the weaponization efforts of Jim Comey, Alvin Bragg, Fonnie Willis, and Jack Smith, we the people saw through it all, and we elected President Trump twice.
Smith brought 2 criminal cases against Trump while he was running in the 2024 election. One was the classified documents case in Florida. The other was the January 6th case in Washington, D.C. He alleged Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election results. Smith said he made his decisions without regard for Trump's political association and candidacy.
As I testify before the committee today, I want to be clear. I stand by my decisions as special counsel, including the decision to bring charges against President Trump. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal activity. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether that president was a Democrat or a Republican.
Both of Smith's cases had largely crumbled even before Trump won the 2024 election. In July of that year, a federal judge dismissed the classified documents case, ruling that Smith had been unlawfully funded and appointed. Smith's team initially appealed the decision, but later wound down the case following Trump's election victory. The January 6th case was put on hold after a Supreme Court ruling. It found that Trump had presidential immunity from federal prosecution for official actions taken while in office. Smith ultimately dropped the case days after Trump's re-election. And there's good news for the economy. First-time unemployment benefit applications from last week remained near 2-year lows. The Bureau of Labor Statistics pegs them at around 200,000. That's up 1,000 from the previous week. But it still keeps the 4-week average the lowest in 2 years. Claims continue to hover around 4-year highs. Also, the third and final revision of last quarter's GDP adjusts it up from 4.3% to 4.4%. That's the fastest pace of growth in 2 years. Now on to the weather, which is expected to get a lot worse over the next few days. Forecasters are warning of a major January winter storm as a polar vortex takes hold of much of the country. The National Weather Service says starting tomorrow, wind chills could drop to as low as 50 degrees below zero in the upper Midwest. And snowfall is expected from Texas and Louisiana across the South and Midwest into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Many major airports may feel the impact, including Dallas, Memphis, Charlotte, and Atlanta. In Atlanta, as residents prepare for the storm, ice melt products are already selling out in hardware stores. Customers are also stocking up on batteries and flashlights in case of power outages. Winter storm advisories are already in place for much of the Midwest and parts of the South. Here's more on the winter weather.
Don't ever wait until the last minute because supplies run out.
Residents in more than 24 states are bracing for a monster winter storm set to bring damaging ice and heavy snow.
It's getting pretty desperate out there. I guess everybody's running out of stuff.
That includes supplies to get ready for the storm.
We've gone through all our supplies, so we've sold out of ice melt.
I'm looking for rock salt.
It's hard to find this stuff.
The massive storm's impact zone could stretch more than 1,500 miles from the plains across the south and into the northeast. More than 90 million people across parts of 23 states are already under winter storm watches.
No, never too soon to worry about the weather.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, one of many state leaders already mobilizing resources to prepare. Airlines and airports, including Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International, one of the world's busiest, also getting ready.
Our snow team, we're doing a lot of preparation.
Of particular concern is the ice set to hit southern states, making roads treacherous and extended power outages possible. North and South Carolina have declared states of emergency. Meanwhile, heavy snow up to a foot in some places is expected to the north of the storm's freezing rain zone. The Arctic blast will also bring bone-chilling cold, potentially breaking daily high and low cold temperature records.
Coming up, our expert panel offers insights. Vice President J.D. Vance meeting with local leaders in Minneapolis over immigration enforcement. We'll examine that and more after this. Welcome back. In a win for federal immigration enforcement, a court has effectively lifted restrictions on how agents can deal with protesters in Minnesota. The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals yesterday paused an order that prevented immigration agents from detaining or using tear gas against protesters if they were not obstructing officers. The court did not provide an explanation for its decision. In a post on X, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi framed the decision as a victory for the Trump administration, saying the restrictions were designed to undermine federal law enforcement. The restrictions are now no longer in effect while the administration waits for the final outcome of its appeal. The activist who allegedly organized an anti-ICE protest during a church service in St. Paul has been arrested. FBI Director Kash Patel says she has been charged with violating the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. Bondi announced the arrest of Nekima Levy Armstrong after protesters stormed a church during a Sunday service. Organizers said the church's pastor works for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Known as the FACE Act, the law in part prohibits the obstruction or threat of force to intimidate or interfere with a person seeking to participate at a house of worship. Bondi also announced the arrest of an employee of the St. Paul Board of Education. Former CNN anchor turned YouTuber Don Lemon live-streamed the incident and questioned the church pastor. The DOJ's Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights suggested that Lemon's behavior also violated the FACE Act and that Lemon was, quote, on notice. And Vice President J.D. Vance was in Toledo, Ohio today promoting President Trump's agenda. Vice said the country is on its way to what he called the Great American Comeback. Here's more of what the Vice President had to say in his home state of Ohio.
We are 1 year in to raising wages for workers instead of declining wages for workers. We're 1 year in to $18 trillion of new investment for the United States of America instead of investment going to every other country but the United States of America. We're 1 year in to getting illegal aliens out of our country so that American homes can go to American citizens, which is exactly where they ought to go. And we are 1 year in to seeing lower inflation and bigger bigger paychecks and more opportunity for the American worker. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we are on the cusp of the greatest economic year in the history of the United States of America because we're doing something new for a change. We're investing in you. We're investing in American workers. We're investing in American businesses, and we're saying to everybody that the United States is open for business, but only if you invest in our great American people and our great American businesses.
Vance is also visiting Minneapolis today to show support for the federal law enforcement operation underway in the city. Vance says he wants to calm tensions in Minneapolis. Take a listen.
Well, certainly one of my goals is to calm the tensions, to talk to people, to try to understand what we can do better. You know, when the president says that that mistakes have been made, you know, my thought on that is that, well, of course there have been mistakes made because you're always going to have mistakes made in law enforcement. If you want to turn down the chaos in Minneapolis, stop fighting immigration enforcement and accept that we have to have a border in this country. It's not that hard.
In Minneapolis, the vice president is scheduled to hold a roundtable with local leaders and community members, which his office says will be focused on restoring law and order in the state. And joining us now to discuss the latest in Minneapolis and tensions over immigration enforcement is our panel, Mike Leon, host of the podcast Can We Please Talk, and director of strategy at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation, as well as Brian Leib, a political strategist and the CEO of Henry Public Relations. Good to have you both here with us. Start with you, Mike. We've just heard now Vice President J.D. Vance heading to Minneapolis today for a roundtable discussion, trying to bring down the heat on the ICE issues there. What do you expect from these talks today?
Yeah, good to see everybody, first and foremost. You know, Steph, I'm going to echo two things that J.D. Vance said there in the package I played before we hopped on that was kind of contradictory to each other. He said, you know, I hope to bring down the tensions, and then in the next breath said something with respect to the way the Democratic lawmakers are kind of handling this, or at least the way people are protesting some of the enforcement actions, right? People are allowed to peacefully protest. That's part of living here in the United States in terms of assembly and peacefully protesting. Maybe not the way the church protest was done, obviously, but they are allowed to peacefully protest about this. And if J.D. Vance truly wants to have cooler heads prevail and bring down the tensions, what he should be doing when he goes to Minneapolis is actually meeting with Mayor Frey, with Governor Walz, talking to local leaders, doing a joint press conference that talks about how we're going to allow ICE to run their operations, follow the law that they're supposed to follow, right, with respect to judicial warrants versus administrative warrants, follow the law there, and then the way the state and local municipalities are going to help with respect to that, and still allow people the right to peacefully protest. If he truly wants to do that, Steph, if he truly wants to accomplish what he said in the first thing in terms of calming down the tensions, he would be doing all of that. Unfortunately, we're not going to see any of that today. I don't believe we're going to see a joint press conference from him and Mayor Frey and Governor Walz, because I don't think people truly want the cooler heads to prevail. But that's the way they should be going about this. That's what his mission should be when he goes over to Minneapolis later today.
Brian, your response.
I think it's a great idea to have bipartisanship and to have Democrats and Republicans working together, but it does take two to tango. And I think, you know, unfortunately, the rhetoric on both sides has really been not very good. So I think, you know, J.D. Vance, the vice president, showing up there today, I think is a good step. And, you know, we'll see if there's, you know, opportunities, you know, for him to meet with some of the local lawmakers. But I also don't think that any of the local lawmakers would have any interest in meeting with him. I mean, they've had pretty choice words about the vice president, about the president, and about Republicans as a whole. So, you know, I'm not sure how this is going to unfold, but I do think it's important that the vice president's going there today and meeting with local officials, local community leaders, and we'll see what comes of it.
And let's look at the feeling right now in the country about the ICE enforcement. Polling shows Trump's approval on immigration has slipped. A new Reuters Ipsos survey finds that approval is at about 40% on this particular issue. Mike, what do you think is the core reason behind this?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Steph, I live in Florida, as you know. I live in Miami, right? So we have this is the gateway to Latin America, right? This is probably people's first stops when they do come into this country because they have family that lives here. We have, Colombians, Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, some that have been affected by TPS status that has been revoked. We have a bunch of issues in this community, but we are seen as that gateway city, right? So immigration is truly front and center in this state and where I'm living. And what I hear from people all the time is, we're not rounding up the bad hombres that President Trump said in his speech. And if we were, again, I'm using DHS's numbers. If you just look at what Trish McLaughlin and what DHS released recently in terms of the self-deportation numbers and then December's numbers at the end of the fiscal year, with respect to how many were actually hardened criminals with a criminal record, I think it was about 7,000 out of 626,000 or so that they released numbers-wise. I mean, that's 0.011%. So there's the feeling in I can only go for the Spanish community because obviously I'm Hispanic, but there's a feeling in the community of we'd be on board with some of this if we were actually targeting and these operations were done and designed to target those type of people. But when we see videos and stories come out, the recent one with the 5-year-old boy who was kind of used in terms of knocking on the door to see if there was any other relatives in, I think people don't understand that it used to be a civil offense, now it's a criminal offense. So obviously it's now become a criminal to be in this country illegally, but it's the way we're targeting these things. It's the way we're going about these things. It's the execution of these operations. That's the sentiment behind all of this. And that's why you see the numbers dip around that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because the issue of the support for Trump on this issue had been for more broadly illegal immigration rather than specifically hardened criminals, although the administration has been speaking out more about their efforts there. But Brian, your sense of what the core issue is here?
The core issue is that we have borders as a country. We have laws that should be followed for individuals that want to immigrate to this great country. We are most certainly a melting pot, the United States of America, and we welcome people from all around the world. But it has to be done right. And I think when you speak with immigrant communities all throughout this country, I have yet to find an immigrant community that doesn't subscribe to that theory about coming here legally is the right way to do it. So, it is a federal criminal offense to enter this country illegally and to stay here illegally. That is an illegal immigrant. I'm sorry. If those words offend certain people, but that is what it is. If you come here illegally, you are residing in this country illegally, and you should be deported. So I don't really think that this is an issue that really should be so controversial. And I think, that's what I think.
All right. Mike, your chance to respond, and also in thinking about how both Democrats and Republicans could approach this issue as the midterms approach.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll piggyback just something on Brian said there. He's right. Like terminology-wise, Democrats got to stop getting offended about the terminology. Again, drive out more voter support. 91 million people didn't participate in the elections. If you had said and ran campaign ads that said this is what's going to happen, ICE is going to come to your front door, and now it's going to be a criminal in nature to be here illegally versus a civil offense like it used to be under previous administrations, maybe they would have gotten some more voters to turn out, and maybe Donald Trump wouldn't be president. But to Brian's point, he is. And this is what they've instituted. In terms of carrying this out message-wise on the midterms, I've had folks that are running for Congress in certain districts. I've had Democratic lawmakers on my show talking about this. No Democrat that I can find anywhere is wearing the, we support criminals t-shirts, for lack of a better joke, Steph. It's about the way we're going about executing this. And I think it speaks to the larger of what I was mentioning before with J.D. Vance. If we truly want the cooler heads to prevail, Brian mentioned that I'm not sure there's any Minnesota lawmakers that would want to meet with J.D. Vance. I agree with that, but there's a reason why, because he gave a press conference right after the killing of Renee Good when he didn't have to do any of that. What we need to start doing is stop with the rhetoric, stop with the buzzwords, come together and figure out how do we enforce the laws that are currently on the books? How do we get ICE to actually follow the laws that are on the books when it comes to little things like administrative versus judicial warrants? And then how do we get people to, within their rights, peacefully protest the actions that are happening with ICE. With respect to the enforcement part of it, it's not a crime to voice your opinion vociferously with a megaphone and then get shot in the face with a spray of pepper spray or things like that. Like, that's not a crime. We shouldn't be treating that as such. You should be allowed to do that, as we're seeing here in the B-roll that's playing as I'm talking. So I think there has to be somebody that can come in. Hopefully J.D. Vance does that today. Again, I'm very skeptical that that'll happen, but hopefully Tim Walz does the same thing, and Jacob Frey. They come out together and they say, look, this is the plan of action that we're going to go about to doing this, so we can set the precedent for the future. Because I hate to break it to everybody, but Donald Trump is in year one. He just completed year one of a 4-year term. So we've got a long road to go, and we're going to see more of this, and we're never going to see cooler heads prevail if we don't actually have the two sides come together and work together.
Certainly. What will that take, Brian?
You know, going into the midterms, I think that immigration is certainly going to be an important issue, but I want to pivot a little bit here and talk more about what we keep hearing about affordability. I mean, affordability really is an issue that's affecting all Americans right now, and costs continue to rise, rent continues to rise, wages are really not rising too much. So, you know, I think going into the midterms, there's going to be a lot of things that the American people, you know, have on their plate and what they're deciding. Immigration certainly is going to be an issue. Affordability is going to be an issue. Crime is going to be an issue. Foreign policy is also likely going to be an issue. So there's a lot of things that the American people are going to be faced with in choosing, you know, who they're going to either reelect or kick out of office when the midterms approach. And we'll see how all these factors, you know, wind up coming together. And I want to echo what my co-panelists said. I mean, I really think it would be nice, you know, for all of us to find some common ground with regards to the immigration issue. You know, again, there's no issue with legal immigration. You're not going to find any Republicans that have, you know, any issues with people coming from all around the world to this country, you know, legally, that want to, you know, come here, build a family here, build a life here. But it does have to be done the right way. And unfortunately, the system has been abused for way too long. And also, let's be honest, the system is totally broken. And, you know, these things need to be revised and fixed. But, you know, would be nice to bring the temperature down a little bit here. I don't know if we're capable of doing that in today's world with politics. But I do think the average American, you know, supports, you know, immigrating here legally and doing it the right way. And that's something I think we should all be striving for.
And we'll be watching what comes of today's meeting, J.D. Vance, with local community leaders. Thank you so much for your time today, Mike Leon, Brian Leib. Good to have you both with us.
Thank you,
Steph.
Coming up, President Trump says the U.S. is negotiating an arrangement to secure full access to Greenland. The details of the planned deal and what Trump says about the costs for the U.S. France intercepts a sanctioned oil tanker from Russia. What the French president says about the Navy operation after this. Welcome back. France intercepted a sanctioned oil tanker from Russia in the Mediterranean earlier today. French President Emmanuel Macron announced the Navy operation on social media platform X. Macron said the tanker was subject to international sanctions and suspected of flying a false flag. He said the operation was carried out this morning with the help of several allies. A judicial investigation has been opened and the vessel has been diverted. The French president said France is determined to uphold international law and to ensure the effective enforcement of sanctions. He added that the activities of the Shadow Fleet contribute to financing the war in Ukraine, and France will not tolerate sanction violations. The United States is set to officially leave the World Health Organization today. President Trump announced the withdrawal on his first day in office in 2025. He did so through an executive order. U.S. law requires 1 year's notice before departure. A State Department spokesperson defended the decision today. The spokesperson said the WHO failed to contain and manage key health threats, which cost the U.S. trillions of dollars. The spokesperson said the president paused all future U.S. funding to the WHO and that Americans have already paid enough. The U.S. has been the WHO's largest donor, providing about 18% of total funding. Its exit has triggered a financial crisis at the WHO. The agency has cut its leadership team in half and has reduced programs and budgets across the organization. The agency says it has continued working with the U.S. It's unclear how that cooperation will continue. And President Trump says the U.S. is negotiating an arrangement to secure full access to Greenland. According to the president, this will include full military access without the U.S. having to pay anything. Trump gave more details on the deal while on Fox News earlier today.
It's total access. There's no end. There's no time limit. We're not doing a 99 or a 10-year or anything else. I'm not going to have to pay anything. We're going to have total access to Greenland. We're going to have all military access that we want. We're going to be able to put what we need on Greenland because we want it. We're talking about national security and international security. So we're going to not have to pay anything other than the fact that we are building the Golden Dome.
Trump says the U.S. should be in charge of Greenland in order to protect NATO from common adversaries such as China and Russia. A top NATO general agrees with Trump. He says the cooperation between China and Russia in the Arctic is a concern for the alliance.
I think one of the most concerning changes in the security situation has been the growing collaboration between Russia and China in the Arctic. And we've seen that over the last several years. It's been both in the maritime domain with increased joint patrols, as well as in the air domain with long-range bomber patrols being conducted jointly. So the activity that they're doing together is definitely increasing.
Greenland is officially a part of Denmark. The country's prime minister commented after Trump's announcement of a possible deal. The prime minister said her country cannot negotiate on its sovereignty. She says anything political can be discussed, such as security, investment, and economic issues, while adding that Denmark can't discuss losing its sovereignty. And for more about Greenland, joining us now is Bart Marcois, foreign policy analyst, former career diplomat, and news commentator creating daily bite-sized news and analysis under A Minute with Bart. Good to have you with us today, Bart. President Trump wants to build the Golden Dome. We've been hearing so much about it. Of course, partly that's why he wants to get access to Greenland. What do you think are the first steps Trump would take if the U.S. is granted control of the island?
I think that the first steps he would take would be to secure it in terms of defense. The reason he's been so hot on Greenland since almost the first day of his presidency is that China, in particular, has been making rapacious moves toward predatory moves toward Greenland. Maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I wrote an article about the Chinese ambitions in the Arctic, and I was shocked to discover that they were going around the world calling themselves an Arctic power. They have no hold on the Arctic, but they had intentions to take over there, and Greenland was going to be their entry point. And so he's gone in rhetorically and said, don't mess with Greenland, and he's made it as clear as possible that it's a top priority for him. So I think that he will move to secure Greenland from any kind of military incursion or military threat, and then to secure it from intelligence threats, from eavesdropping and that sort of thing from the Chinese and also from the Russians. But China is the real predator in the region.
Okay, if this mission somehow fails, if the U.S. were not able to come in and establish its presence more fully there, what would become of the way that China treats Greenland?
China has been working assiduously to undermine the current governing structure in Greenland. They've been doing what they've done all over the world. They go in and whisper in the ears of people who will listen. Listen, you could make a lot of money. You could retire and be rich. Just sign this cooperative agreement, this economic cooperative agreement that gives us access to your rare earth minerals, or that will let us come in and build a port for you, or build roads, or some other kind of infrastructure. And it would become a thin entering wedge, as it has in so many countries in Africa and in the Southern Hemisphere. They've gone to poor countries all over the world, and essentially they've made deals and found somebody that they could corrupt. I don't know who it is in Greenland. I don't know the details. I just know the way the Chinese government operates and what they've done in dozens of other countries. And anytime there are resources they want access to, that's their pattern. And that's what they would do. And before Greenlanders were aware, they'd wake up one morning and find that China was really in control of their future, their economic future, and a good deal of their political future.
And what does that look like, that scenario?
Oh, pick any country where they've already done it. It's slavery. It's extended slavery. They sign an agreement that gives them 40 years control over a key piece of infrastructure in exchange for building it or for building an improvement to it, and they bankrupt the country that they're working in, and the person who was the leader who signed the agreement quietly disappears and is living large in some resort location for the rest of his life because he got a multi-$100 million bribe to sign the agreement. And the people of Greenland or whatever other country are left to pay the bill.
Can European allies manage to work on the strength of Greenland without the U.S.? Is there a scenario where that would ever be a likely outcome?
Never in a million years, because the European allies themselves are divided. There's a lot of Chinese influence in Western Europe, and also even in Central Europe and Eastern Europe. The Central and Eastern European countries are more resistant because they've only recently been liberated from communism, and they're very wary of any communist outreach. But there's a great deal of, I mean, look in the UK, look at the new Chinese embassy that Keir Starmer seems to have approved. I'm not sure whether it can be stopped or not, but they're building a massive Chinese embassy, and it just happens to have a secret room in the plans that will be just maybe 3 feet or 5 feet away from the main fiber optic cable, the main fiber optic channel that services the City of London and really all of the UK internet. That kind of proximity allows surveillance and spying, and Keir Starmer has let it happen. You know, can you rely on Keir Starmer to keep China out of Greenland when he can't even keep it out of London?
Well, certainly this seems to be just the beginning of the story for Greenland. We'll be watching very closely. Thank you for your insights today, and good to see you again, Bart Marcois.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Next, a congressional declassification task force held a hearing today to examine why some records regarding Martin Luther King Jr. remain sealed and redacted. Task Force Chairwoman Anna Paulina Luna said the government hasn't been transparent about King's assassination.
Over time, it has become increasingly clear that our federal government was not honest about this investigation regarding the tragedy or its abuses leading up to it. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the FBI waged an extensive campaign of surveillance, intimidation, and harassment against Dr. King.
Members also explored how the federal government's lack of transparency undermined Americans' confidence in it. Witnesses included the late King's niece, Dr. Alveda King, chair of American Dream and America First Policy Institute. Also, Mr. Stuart Wexler, author and investigative researcher. They discussed how Congress can help the government restore Americans' trust. King's niece said the declassification of her uncle's records was a meaningful and historic step toward faith, truth, and justice.